Hey, I first want to point out what we call the lake effect. This is all the girl fellows on one side and the guys on the other, except I didn't get the memo, unfortunately. So, smart growth for the masses. There actually is a picture of a city back there, but you can't see it. But basically, the title of my presentation is Smart Growth for the Masses, because lots of times people critique smart growth in saying that it's too expensive, but I say we just need to build more of it so that the price will go down and we will have smart growth for the masses, because all we need is more well-planned communities to have lower prices. It's pretty simple economics. You can go. So, after studying cities for a period of about 4 months, 400 plus hours working at Partnership for Smarter Growth, I have basically decided that cities boil down to about 3 categories, or what I've decided are the 3 main categories. And that's history, buildings, and people. Buildings, or the built environment, what you see as the physical space of the city. And the history is basically what I see as why the buildings exist for the people to live and work. Or in other words, the history is why what exists for whom. That's what I'd say. So you can go on to the next slide. I have to apologize for breaking PowerPoint protocol by putting all of this terrible text on, but the quote is too perfect. It says, this is a mid-century politician. He said, "It seems to me that in some fashion, we must encourage the rebuilding of the city, the repair and improvement of buildings, and the full and best use of all vacant or slum property in the city. If we don't do this, you will find all the energies of the metropolitan area directed to the cutting down of trees and the building of new communities, with the total abandonment of everything we now have." I couldn't help but put that up there because 50 years later, Partnership for Smarter Growth and I, for a summer, are working towards the same goal that has unfortunately still not been realized, but we still have hope. And also, I'd like to say that history kind of teaches me that I'm not all that original, because the problems of today are basically the unsolved problems of yesterday. And if we don't realize they've been going on for this long, we'll never figure out what we've been doing wrong all along to finally make sure they won't be the problems of tomorrow. So, considering I only have 7 minutes, I'll just tease you with this quote and say, learn more about the history of Richmond. It's fascinating, it's terrible, it's wonderful, and we should all know about the city that we live in. And yes, we've only made marginal efforts so far to realize this simple but seemingly impossible vision for our wonderful city. You can go to the next slide now. So, thoughtful nostalgia. As a smart growth advocate, I used to look back on the city of Richmond, this compact city with iron storefronts and streetcars and people in white hats, and with this strong nostalgia, because I thought this must be it. This must be the heyday of Richmond. And in learning about the history of Richmond, I also realized that this was the time of Richmond when segregation was strict, when the white power structure was vamping up after the Civil War at the turn of the century and getting ready to impose all sorts of terrible policies to silence the working class and black communities in Richmond. So it was not all that perfect. I actually concluded my final research paper that was due the first day of classes, which was incredible, with the question, has the white and or affluent American ever been capable of living in close proximity to members of a racial minority or those living in abject poverty without the need for strict segregation? Because in looking at our history, I can't really see a good example of an answer in the affirmative. But I have to hope that there is one, because everything I hope and dream for smart growth, it lies on an answer in the affirmative. So we must also look at our history to learn about what makes the future possible, or hopefully not impossible. You can go to the next slide. So which buildings? Basically, I look at the built environment as a physical result of the history of politics in a certain space, and other people look at the built environment simply as it is, without considering the history of the place. So as a result, you get many different perspectives on the built environment. Some that take into context the history, and others that simply look at the lay of the land, as it were. So I personally believe that a knowledge of the oppressive policies of the 20th century would allow many residents to have a more considerate view of the least well-off residents of the city, because it's not, there was a lot of policy that led to creating the city that we now live in and enjoy. So if you simply take the city for what it is, you usually hear two perspectives. You can go, this, I have to admit, is my perspective, and some other people's in the rooms maybe, but this is what I think of when I think of the county. Quick, unchecked growth, car dependent. At the top you see what was once Henrico Plaza. I think people used to shop there, but now it's just a parking lot because they tore down the buildings. And below it is the new West Broad Village out across the street from Short Pump. And I guess what I plan on teaching you all about urban growth is that lots of times developers don't care about the space itself. They care about the money that you can make in that space. So when the money's gone, the people are gone, you leave. And that's a problem, I think. So over here is my city. You have Bob Gurridge playing the Mighty Wurlitzer on a Saturday night in the Bird Theater, and that is so city to me. Below that is a picture of row house buildings on Hull Street. I think they're beautiful, uniform, compact architectural design, and they're almost all vacant, unfortunately. You can go to the next slide. So another perspective, and another valid perspective, is one of usually crime and education, two reasons people typically move out of the city and into the counties. And I guess I have to add, these are all value-based judgments, so it basically just emphasizes different elements of the city and the city life. So these are screenshots from the Richmond Times-Dispatch about Chandler, about gang violence and other types of violence. On the right is a picture from residential Midlothian. We have a resident. It's beautiful. I chose it to represent the peaceful and perfect, tranquil environment that comes to typify the suburban experience. And while I could never fault someone for living in this environment, there are too many reasons, including social justice and environmental justice, that lead me to believe that we just cannot continue growing in this direction. The land can't support it, and the inner cities simply can't support the increasing class and racial segregation. But because it's nice to live in these types of living spaces, without incredible economic incentives, I can't imagine we'll ever see anything differently. You can go to the next slide. So the last category of the city is the people, and the question, all the people, is supposed to imply that lots of times most of the people don't get taken into consideration. The city of Richmond has people with a strong voice and sense of efficacy, people without strong voice and sense of efficacy. And the history of Richmond tells us that people in the city who believe that no one cares have a good reason for believing that no one cares, because no one really has. And I guess I should say that my faculty advisor and I share a lot, because I was already going to mention that not many people probably now in the suburbs care about the redevelopment of Gilpin Court that's going on. A lot of people in the city care very deeply about this. So I guess it's 2009, so the question is, how do we now start an inclusive dialogue for the whole Richmond region? Enter Partnership for Smarter Growth. PSG is an education advocacy nonprofit organization. The goal of PSG is to organize citizens and unite nonprofits across the entire Richmond region in order to build a better city from the inside out. Smart growth is not socialism or communism. Smart growth is logical and conservative. Use what we already have for the good of the city. Smart growth values what Richmond residents have been running away from for the last 100 years, and that's the urban core. And our message is, we value you as you are. It's not perfect, but we believe that it's the best option that we have. So I also have to say, for the top, congratulations, Thomas Jefferson. It's almost impossible to understand city politics in Virginia if you're from another state. I'm from Texas, and most of the time, rich people have to move a lot farther away to get out from under the tax base of a struggling urban core. But Virginia made it a lot easier with the city-county distinction, and it was confusing for about a year, and then I finally realized what was going on. Somebody had a clue. The rich white people knew what they were doing, and Jefferson hated cities, so we've got definitely a historic legacy in Virginia. You can go to the next slide. Christopher Silver wrote a book called 20th Century Richmond. I read it. It was long and very tedious, but it was fascinating, and he concluded it saying, thus Richmond and its planners adhered to the traditional Southern protectiveness over local prerogatives and accepted change only so long as it did not jeopardize the status quo. It's a pretty frightening conclusion. Not frightening, it's telling, I suppose. But I basically do not want to see that the thesis of the next book written about Richmond, say 21st century Richmond, will end with the same conclusion. So we seriously have a long way to go, but I want to bring you back to that empty parking lot that I showed you, Henrico Plaza, and conclude with my annoyingly optimistic belief that more than anything we have a lot of room for improvement. So you can go to the next slide. It's just a thank you to Cassie Price, CCE, Dr. Williamson, Sheila Shepard, and the power duo at PSG. One of them is here tonight, and everyone who's given to the program to make it possible. So thank you very much.